We were talking about the wall earlier. I see Ronald Reagan tweeted out an image of what appears to be, who's that? Yeah, exactly. Mike, who's that? The unrequited racist from Indiana, Steve King and John Kelly, with an image of a wall that is, it's like a tiny concrete wall with panels, and then they have some wire on the top. It's so cute. And it turns out that's not the one. It wasn't a very artistic one. I want the artistic one where you get the slats. You need to have the slats because it's when the slats go down like this with the wall, it makes it slimming. It's much slimminger. Yeah. So that's an ugly wall. They think that's a pretty wall. That's an ugly wall. And
it's not even see-through.
Well, first of all, you can't see through it. So if someone throws a bag of drugs over, you could get
can't see it.
You could get hit on the head on the other side.
I want to get hit by drugs.
Or it also, you look at that wall, it looks fat because it does not have the slats, which is slimming.
Did you read the Butterfly Sanctuary article about how I voted for Trump and now it's eminent domain my butterfly paradise?
Oh no, I did not. But yeah,
it was pretty amazing. But when they actually described the scar that this wall is going to put across the if we actually made it, how much it's just sort of ecological violence it would be. It's just it's ridiculous. I mean, the guy deserves it for voting for Trump, but
definitely
just that part.
Bring your butterfly thing to my house. Saul would love it. He loves butterflies. Here is Simone Sanders on CNN. And it is, this does not happen enough. The basic premise of all of this is that there's some type of crisis with huge gangs and violence and terrorists. I mean, they keep trying to make it sound like a crisis. And they'll say stuff like there were 10 terrorists over the weekend who were arrested at the border. We just didn't tell you about it until now because we didn't want to brag. Or
sometimes
hey,
you gotta keep things.
We don't want to freak people out, but there is all of these immigrants. They have all sorts of strange, exotic medical diseases that are spreading out around. We don't want anybody to panic. That's why we didn't mention it. Or there's all this murder that's coming across. There's murderers, all murderers. This is it's becoming murder central.
Murderer central.
And the idea is to make it sound like there's some type of crisis. And the reality is there is no crisis. To the extent that there is a crisis, we're creating it. We're creating a crisis in the lives of these children that are being warehoused. We're creating a crisis in the lives of these families. There is no crisis. We can afford to absorb all of these people. But you don't hear that premise questioned enough.
Chuck Schumer brought this up in the Oval Office meeting they had last week. We gave you $1.2 billion last year. Where is it? I, as a fiscal conservative, am somewhat bothered by the fact that no one really knows what the wall should cost. They asked for $5 billion. Well, I would like to see the $1.2 billion be put to work now. I don't know why you're waiting.
Can we also debunk the notion that somehow America's borders are not secure? I don't know if you've ever left the country, but I leave the country quite often.
Well,
and every time I come back to the country,
we have a crisis at the border. I mean,
okay, but
there's detention centers because we do have a crisis.
This crisis at the border never forget, part of this is a manufactured crisis. We can talk about our immigration policy. Yes, we have a crisis in terms of our immigration policy, that it's broken in America and it needs to be fixed. But the idea that we just have open borders and folks are running up and through the United States of America is not true.
Well, they are. That's how families end up in detention centers and get separated. And we have that whole other crisis.
The United States of America, though, Amanda, that is not true.
What do you mean? There are people, there are undocumented immigrants.
There are undocumented immigrants, but the idea that there's nothing happening at the border and there's just an influx of people just running.
The vast majority
Yes.
of people who are here illegally because they overstayed their visa.
They overstayed a
We've
visa, or
already
they come on an
stopped them.
airplane. They're
They
just not running through
they
the
fly
borders
out.
of the United States of
There
America.
are people. I've been to the border, and you see people crossing illegally. I mean, it does happen.
I'm not saying there are no, I want to be clear. I'm not saying there are no illegal
There's
crossings,
Democratic
period.
senators going to the border and saying that there's child prison camps because people are at the border in crisis, being housed in
You're saying it's
insufficient
not the
government
crisis
facilities.
that President Trump is pretending
Yes,
to be.
that is exactly what I'm saying. And every time a Republican operative or member of Congress gets on television and says the Democrats are calling for open borders and they just want our borders to be open and our borders are not secure, I'm telling you that's not
We're not
true.
going to be able to resolve this.
Well, there's two things here.
Resolve it.
There's two things here. One, it's a definition of a crisis. There is no urgent crisis. There's like no danger here. And the other issue is just in terms of like, you know, whether there's no border security. There's border security. Listen, I wash my hands so I don't catch a cold, but I don't walk around in a plastic bag. And yes, I could get a cold. I could get sick. I could catch the plague if I'm in the right place at the right time. But there's also just sort of like, where do you devote your resources? What is the cost benefit analysis of what you're talking about? Never mind, you know, basic questions of humanity and basic questions of decency, or even basic questions of like net positive that we get from immigrants. Just in terms of like, even if you accept all the premises, there's no crisis. Even if you're worried about what's happening in terms of, you know, white identity, I got news for you. It's not because of what's happening at the border that your precious white identity is getting diluted. That's not what's causing that. The crisis is actually happening with your fellow Americans, if that's your fear.
And the crisis only began to be manufactured, at least this one, fairly recently. Like, I feel like people don't even realize that up until 2003, I believe the INS worked mainly with the Department of Labor, and only the 2003, I'm pretty sure it's 2003, the DHS was involved, and they made immigration into a national security thing.
Well, it was all in the wake of 9/11.
Yeah.
That was all. The Department
Yeah,
of
that
Homeland
was when it
Security did
became
not exist
terror.
until then.
It made
Everything
it
became
became a terrorism issue.
Yes,
because that was also the original bigotry of all these programs. It was a Muslim hysteria before it was Latin America
Yeah, but
hysteria.
they used it very conveniently to leak into other areas
course.
that they found to be politically
Well, it's
advantageous.
also the
Who would have predicted
self-looking-
that?
Yeah, no one would have ever seen that. Also, the whole, as far as I understand, the whole infrastructure around like private contractors and Homeland Security and
there was so
business
much money.
incentive and structure.
That's what
to
made
just make a stunning amount of money off of
Rudy
spying on
Giuliani made a ton of cash.
Yeah, that was his whole consultancy. So.
A ton of cash. A lot of that stuff was privatized
Right.
during that. There was a whole
Right.
privatization giveaway, which is why at one point, like the unions being part of, I think it was the TSA, if I remember correctly, was such a big issue because so much of this was attempted to be privatized.